thing is showing up? Okay. Who motioned? Okay, I have Councilmember Gorski made a motion, who seconded? Okay, Councilmember Elder seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda as published, signify by saying aye. Aye. The agenda is approved. Thank you, Council. Okay, we have two presentations. Let me just check. Do we have high school students out there tonight here for your credit? I see three hands. Okay, so here's the rule. There will be two opportunities for public comment this evening. With three of you here using the advanced Euclidean geometry that we use to decide these kind of arbitrary government decisions, at least one of you has to come up at some point during public comments and make comment about something. And what we have found is we got some very insightful, thoughtful comments from our high school students in the past. So think about it. You're all welcome to come up, but at least one of you does, and then myself or any of the council members will sign off on your paperwork at the end of the meeting. Okay, with that, we have two presentations this evening, and both of those are Public Works Director Gus Lynn.
Hi, good evening. With me today for the Washington DOT Point Defiance Bypass update is Janet Matkin from Washington DOT, and also Corey Adams from Sound Transit. Inside their package is a cover sheet that just gives a summary. This presentation is focused on the upcoming rail testing and signal testing that will be occurring.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here tonight. We're here to talk about the Point Defiance Bypass, which is the rail system that runs between Tacoma and DuPont in the Squally area. Amtrak Cascade is owned by the Washington State Department of Transportation. This is one of the projects that we're undertaking to ensure faster, more reliable, and more frequent service to citizens of Washington State. Instead of the path in green that's on the map going along the water, we're now going to reroute Amtrak Cascade's trains to Point Defiance Bypass, which is shown in orange. It's as part of that project, we've reconstructed the railroad crossings, added lots of safety measures in terms of warning signals, updated and coordinated all of the signals. We have new bridges that we've reconstructed, put in new track, upgraded the entire route to make it accessible for new passenger trains that will be going through. As part of this project is also the new Amtrak Cascade station in Tacoma, Fray House Square. So we're here tonight to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in the next couple of months, as well as talk to you about the more long-term goals.
As you guys have probably noticed, over the last year we have been in construction. Currently right now we are in the testing phase. So when we say testing of the rail, we're testing to make sure that the track is stabilized, since it's all new track. Typically tracks maintain their stability by a bunch of trains running all over them. So what we did last weekend was actually run using a Tacoma freight rail train. We ran their engine up and down the track to make sure all the ballast is stabilized and to make sure that it is ready to accommodate the future service. The next phase of the testing is the testing of the track and signals. So at each intersection, since we will have trains running up to 79 miles an hour, we need to make sure that the signal arms are coming down in the proper amount of time that they need to in order to stop vehicles from passing through. The way they do that is we will be working with Amtrak in order to get their equipment, train equipment, and then we will be testing the signals at increments of 10 miles an hour up until all of the signals have been certified from the top perimeter of the track project, which is South 66th Street in South Tacoma, all the way down to Nisqually Junction. When this testing phase will occur, we will have officers located at all of the impacted intersections along that route. Because we are testing the signals, we want to make sure that everyone is operating in a safe fashion and that no cars get greedy and go around the arms. After that work is done, we will go into a lull period until looking forward to the future Amtrak service.
So I talked a little bit about the safety measures that we put in place. I just wanted to review all those for your benefit. So all of the new intersections, including the ones at Barksdale, as well as on up the route at Berkeley, Thorne, and Bridgeport. All of them are synchronized with the traffic signals, so that ensures that there's minimal queuing of traffic, that there will not be cars that will end up stuck on the tracks when the arms come down. So all of those signals are coordinated with one another and synchronized to ensure driver safety. In addition, we put in median barriers, which prevents cars from being able to go around the gates. So it's a safety measure for those who sometimes get too anxious about waiting for the train. The fact of the matter is, when the gates come down, from the time the gates come down till they go back up again is less than a minute. It'll be about 45 seconds total. There's also new signage that alerts people to not stop on the tracks and to tell people that walking along the railroad tracks is trespassing. All of the sidewalks in those areas where there are sidewalks have been upgraded to be ADA accessible. We've also installed wayside horns at each of the intersections, which means that the trains themselves will not have to blow their whistles, except if there's some kind of an emergency situation. But for the most part, those wayside horns will be directed at the intersections so that the noise will only occur and be heard by those vehicles and pedestrians at the intersections. We've also put up fencing along both sides of the tracks the entire length of the route, except of course at the intersections themselves, to provide another safety barrier. When the service starts this fall, and we're looking at the September-October time period, there will be a total of 14 passenger trains per day going along this route. They'll be scheduled from about 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Some trains obviously could be late on any given day, but for the most part, that's when they are scheduled. As I talked about, it's less than a minute for each of the intersections. What's important to remember is that these trains are very quiet, they're shorter, they're, we have 8 brand new locomotives that are coming that are state-of-the-art, very, very quiet locomotives and trains. Because we put in all the new track, there will be no more clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack sounds. So people can't hear the trains coming. That's why it's so important to us to ensure that people know that this service is starting and that people are aware of how to be safe around the train tracks. Part of what we are doing is sending out posters and flyers in the community. We've distributed these posters through all of the elementary school students in the Steilacoom district, as well as provided information to the older students as well. I was told by the school district that it probably would not make sense to send flyers home with the older students because they'll either end up in the parking lot or in the bottom of lockers or backpacks. So we decided to save that cost, but we did send out information electronically as well as we've done posters to put up in the schools. In addition to the schools, we've been working with businesses. The DuPont Business Association sent out the same information to all of their members. We are working with the JBLM community to ensure that they have that information. As you can see, our spokesperson is a Seattle Seahawk, Doug Baldwin, one of the best receivers in the NFL. We're going to be having a community event this spring, which will be publicizing widely, which will include an appearance by Doug Baldwin, focused on train safety. We're also working with an organization called Operation Lifesaver, which is dedicated to train safety. They are making presentations throughout the community. Nearly all the schools have asked for them to come and make presentations, but they're also available to talk with businesses and community groups and those kinds of organizations. So if you have ideas for us on other presentations that would make sense for them to sort of do, we'd be happy to hear from you. We're also running a safety message from Doug Baldwin at the Lakewood movie theaters. So before all the movies, you can see this message. Thought that was a great way to reach one of our target audiences, at least, probably several of them at the same time. We've also geo-targeted some ads on Pandora, which is a music app, trying to reach the teenage population. And finally, we're using all of our social media channels to ensure that we share as much information as possible with as large a group as possible. Any questions?
Councilmember Helder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you both for this information. Just a couple of questions. For the testing and certification that starts next month, do we have an idea, or do you have an idea of what time of day that's going to be taking place? Maybe even the frequency of how many times a day, what days?
Right now, it'll be during daylight hours outside of the sounder trips. So the sounder trips typically operate in the morning commute and then the evening commute. We have a new midday service. So within those windows of time, they'll be operating. It's a little fuzzy still, and for the actual testing, it kind of takes as long as it takes, because if for some reason they don't get past a certain signal at a certain speed, they have to kind of go back and figure out what's catching them up. And so hopefully it'll go really smoothly, but
We're expecting that it will take probably a week, maybe 2 weeks.
Okay. And has there been any coordination with the city maybe to see kind of how it's going to impact our traffic flow just for that? I know it's a testing period, but it's kind of a good maybe dress rehearsal for us to see what it's going to look like, what the impacts are going to be. That might be something more for our staff, but.
Yeah, we'll be happy to coordinate with the city staff.
Councilmember Wesson.
Several of us were on council when this was first proposed quite a few years ago, and we expressed our concerns at that particular time having to do with pedestrian crossing as well as vehicle crossing. I must say you've done a good job in dealing with the vehicle crossing to ensure that there's no collision out there. I do have a concern having to do with the pedestrian crossing. In the extent of letting those pedestrians who are joggers and walkers and all this, there was an article today, the front page, I believe it was, the News Tribune, a jogger going across a controlled intersection with the Amtrak. Very dangerous. My suggestion is that growing up, I remember that when you're approaching either by car or by walking, you stop at the railroad tracks, you look, and you listen before you go across. I don't necessarily see that being emphasized. Secondly, pedestrians need to be channeled so that as they go across the track at the intersection, they go into a particular channel to go across. They're not being scattered all over the place here. So that's a concern I have. And number three, the engineers who are operating these trains, are they trained? Are they checked? Are their observation at each of these crossings very, very critical. We read in the paper that more and more it seems like operator failure has led to these accidents, and so the concern I have, children, pedestrians, going into the future, excellent job on vehicles, if you know, and in blocking them, but I'm concerned about the vehicles. So if you could, can you respond a little bit to my concern having to deal with that? We see down in Sumner, we see in Puyallup, we see in Renton, in Kent, people being hit by the trains. So what can we do to ensure, or at least hopefully reduce that from ever happening here in DuPont at the Barksdale crossing?
We also share your concerns. One of the campaigns that we've created is called Stay Back from the Tracks, primarily focused on pedestrians. The campaign with Doug Baldwin is part of that, trying to reach as many people as possible with information on how important it is to be safe around the train tracks. And it really is, when it comes to pedestrian, in a lot of cases it's individual decisions that they make that sometimes are not the wisest ones. You know, in the case of that you were talking about, that was on the front page of the News Tribune, it was actually two trains coming from opposite directions. The lights were still flashing, but the pedestrian, once one train passed, decided that it was safe for them to go ahead and go across, even though the lights were still flashing and the gates were down. That's a tragic loss that shouldn't have happened. And so we're totally in sync with you in terms of the importance of ensuring that people understand how dangerous it is when you're crossing railroad tracks and how important it is to stop, look, and listen. As far as the importance of reaching those audiences, we're trying, that's what Operation Lifesaver is all about. That's really their goal. At the intersections, there are the sidewalks, which do in fact direct people, you know, where they're supposed to go. And the fence starts, you know, right at the edge. So people who are choosing to go to trespass, if you will, to go along the railroad tracks, are doing so with a conscious decision that we don't want them to ever think that that's an okay thing. You should never be on the railroad side of the tracks, or the fence. You should always be on the outside of that fencing. What was your?
Having to do with the engineers.
Oh yes, engineers. Trains can't stop quickly. That's the bottom line. It takes up to a mile for trains to stop. So by the time an engineer sees someone, it's probably too late for them to do anything. But what I will assure you is there's something called positive train control that's going into all of the lines that carry passenger trains. So this entire corridor will be part of that system, and it will be operational and up and running next year. Positive train control lets all of the trains in that corridor talk to one another. It can actually take over control of a train if it sees an issue up ahead. It can actually, you know, if the engineer is not paying attention or has a medical condition or something happens, it can actually stop the train remotely so that there's not the kind of incidents that we saw, like, for example, back in Philadelphia with Amtrak a couple of years ago. So that positive train control is something that's nationwide. It's something that people like you, advocates, been pushing for a long, long time. So it will be in place this year. Mhm.
Councilmember Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions here. You mentioned that there was going to be officers in each of these locations. What type of officers are you talking about?
The last weekend when they had the first initial segment of testing, they worked with the City of Lakewood cops. I believe they had 36 officers out, but they were staffed at 15 officers at a time, so kind of broke up the shift, if you will.
Okay.
So similar to that.
And then, you know, it mentions in all these things up to 79 miles per hour. Is that a threshold? And what's the difference between 79 miles per hour and 80 miles per hour? I mean,
It is a threshold that is set by the Federal Railroad Administration. So our trains, that's the maximum our trains are allowed to go, 79 miles per hour. You have to meet a lot more standards in terms of the trains.
they can't go faster, they're just not
They
supposed to.
can go faster, but they will not go faster.
Okay. And then how much time is saved between this reroute, between Tacoma and Portland?
It's saving at least 10 minutes. It's more about the fact that we're separating the passenger from the freight rail. That's really what it's designed to do, is to ensure that our trains can get through and are not stopped by the freight trains, like this frequently happens currently on the old bypass.
Okay, and the last question, you mentioned those horns that they're directed towards the intersections themselves, but do you really mean that the businesses around won't hear those? They will still hear those, right?
There was a lot of analysis done at the time of the design, and actually at Barksdale, I think that entire perimeter, and Gus, maybe you can remember exactly how far
See, I have a graphic, I don't have it here with me, but I can send it out after this meeting, that shows the difference between a wayside horn and the horns mounted on a train. It's the noise arc is significantly depressed, since it's focused right on the rail itself. But if you can think of it, if you can follow the rail itself, think of it as a big oval on it, and then the difference compared to now a wayside horn, instead of an oval, it's like a dot in the middle, similar to a small Band-Aid. So I can get that graphic out to everyone so they can see how it looks.
So for example, State Farm, in their big facility, will not hear the train whistle at, whereas if it was the train coming through and blowing its whistle, it would probably have to start back at that point before it reached the intersection.
That will be interesting to
Yes,
test
so,
that out, to check to see.
Mhm.
yeah, so all the people sleeping in the brand new hotel that hasn't even opened yet at Barksdale Station, that's the closest building to that horn, aren't gonna hear a thing.
Well, the trains will only go till 10 p.m., so if they're, so hopefully it will not disturb their sleep.
Okay, Councilmember Gorski.
Thank you. I grew up in a community that Amtrak go through, and I find a lot of the comments on unnecessarily worrisome, but people will make bad decisions, and that's true. But you'll see worse decisions made between here and Tacoma on I-5, volume 100 times greater. So I'm not too worried. But what I do concern myself, and I go back to the point brought up by Councilman Court. So the officers that were from Lakewood last week, and we don't know yet, is there going to be a flagger or police at Barksdale? Is that cost being bared by the city?
No, it should be wrapped up in the project cost.
Okay, so if you put an officer there, you reimburse the city?
They negotiated something with the City of Lakewood, so it was the City of Lakewood police
So
officer that
the
was
city of
there.
Lakewood police will be at our intersection.
Yeah.
Who were there this last weekend? Two cars. Mr. Erickson.
Thank you. Kind of playing on the wayside horns, people will hear it. We sit here and hear, all sorts of things come to the dais. So But what I'm more concerned is kind of the information that Gosselin may have, but also what can we expect realistically into Barksdale and where it's residential, and I can guarantee you people are going to hear it. Because, and so, you know, we need to be ready as a council to field those inquiries and talk to these people about, you know, what's happening. So I just want to make sure that if it's a wayside horn, it's directed, and is that frequently, or is there a schedule in which you verify that horn is directed properly? So is that part of standard maintenance that you go through quarterly, annually, that you're re-looking at that? Because that's a safety measure, so.
That's a good point. I don't know the answer to that, but we
Okay.
can find out.
And if you could just pass it on to our Public Works Director.
Absolutely.
The other thing was the 79 mile an hour, that's the threshold, I understand that. Is there a set speed for which they're going to be traveling through DuPont that we will know that they're going at a set speed? Or are they maxed out? Are they going 79?
They will probably be going very close to 79 miles per hour.
Okay, and my concern there is that the set speed, or the speed that they normally do is 60 and it goes up to 79, the response time for people who may get into a mode where they're used to how long that gate is down and feel that it's down too long, or, you know, so even if they decrease their speed to 60 and people think the gates are down too long, I worry that people will make bad decisions based on that, but that's not your concern. And then last one is schedule changes for Amtrak. So we know that there's 14 scheduled services 14 times a day between 7 and 10 p.m. Does that, or can that change when they would be passing through the city, and in some reasonable amount of time? So what I'm getting at is, again, there's a cadence that's established for people who are used to the trains. If that changes dramatically and it comes at times where they're not expecting it, again, if you do get any schedule changes, I'd like to see WashDOT send that information to the city so we can propagate that out to our citizens so that
That
they
makes
know.
a lot of sense, yes.
Okay, and so, and the last thing is, I always laugh when someone says state-of-the-art with regards to trains, this is 18th century technology, and they're not maglev, so it's like, you know, state-of-the-art for 18th century, we're doing pretty good, so, but thank you.
Councilmember Coffey.
Yes, thank you. I thought it was very catchy advertising that you did use Doug Baldwin. I thought, I've seen a little clip of his little thing.
His message, yes.
It was really good. I believe that Stiligan had a wayside horn installed down there where I think the railroad crosses, I think, by the ferry dock. Anyway, you might want to check with the Public Works Director and Stiligan about that. And, you know, I have very sensitive ears, and I hear railroad train horns now. So whether it's coming out of the Nisqually or it's down by the water, I don't know, but whatever. I mean, I guess it's just a fact.
Yeah, I can't say that you won't hear them,
Right.
but that it will not be the same magnitude as if the trains were blowing their whistle.
I'm just curious, how many on-grade crossings does Lakewood have? Do you know?
3, I believe. Barksdale, Clover Creek, North Burn Lane, and Berkeley.
Okay, well, I'm just thinking because I'm kind of familiar with all that area and going into Tacoma, I would think there'd be quite a few.
Going into Tacoma, I think there's about 11 along the whole stretch. That's the new track.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I just hope people become very aware of it because.
Well, that's part of why we're here tonight, is that we want your help to be ambassadors in terms of sharing information with people, and as well as giving us ideas of what additional outreach makes sense in this community.
Right. Thank you.
Couple comments that I've got. I know you're doing everything you can from a safety standpoint, and I think as Councilmember Gorski pointed out, tragedy, but you can only do what you can do. It would be helpful to us if we could get the links to your videos. We don't have a movie theater, but we have websites, we have Facebook pages, and so those Doug Baldwin videos, I don't think Doug likes us anyway, but that's a whole other story I won't go into. He doesn't like me, Doug doesn't like me.
What did you do to Doug?
We're not gonna go down that road, that would be a long discussion. But the links to those videos that we could host so our public could see those,
We would love
city
that.
website, Facebook page, we have various community-based Facebook pages, that would be very helpful. When this was proposed, DuPont was not in favor of it. And, you know, be very, very honest about it. And we still face the challenge that we will not have grade separation here for probably about 5 years when the new exit 119 gets built. And so I know that you all have done everything to mitigate the safety, and we appreciate that. Just be aware that the challenge is that the DuPont gate on JBLM is the busiest gate in the JBLM inventory. And the ebb and flow is different for JBLM than it is for a normal business world. You have the early PT traffic, the PT traffic coming out. Then you have the civilian workforce in. Then the soldiers coming back after they've gone home for breakfast after PT. Then everybody comes to DuPont for lunch. And then you have 3 different shifts leaving at night. So you have a lot of back and forth. Exit 119 is also the only commercial entrance into DuPont. There were between $2.5 and $3 billion worth of commerce going out that way. 15% of the gravel, right? And so 15% of Cal Portland's product goes out that way. We have FedEx, Amazon, Dania, Pier 1, and we have 400 acres of undeveloped commercial property. That the ability of entities to get on and off of I-5 is critical to their businesses. 45 seconds to a minute may not sound like a lot of time, but that's 14 times a day that the flow of traffic gets interrupted. We're also the favored bypass for I-5. When something bad happens, exit 119 is the first place you can get off and go Lakewood, Stillicum, and get around the whole thing. And so there's a lot of people going down that 2-lane road and over that small crossing. So one of our concerns, our biggest concern beyond the safety, is the disruption. You know, the only mitigation that will happen for that is the grade separation with the I-5 expansion. But just so understand, that was something we didn't support, and it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do to make it not happen. The other thing I would just throw out to WashDOT as you engage with, I guess, Burlington Northern, whoever owns the tracks, is they just violated DuPont ordinances, even though I know you can't tell the train anything. But we don't permit uncovered chain link fence in our city. According to the Partnership for Puget Sound, one of the 3 worst contributors to toxins in Puget Sound is the zinc leaching off of cyclone fences. Every cyclone fence in the city of DuPont is covered, and most municipalities are going to that. So now that 6-foot chain link fence that runs right through our city is uncovered. That would have been a smart thing for them to do, to have covered chain link fencing.
Did that ever come up during the design process?
How much do you think they
Interesting.
talked to any of us? I mean, really?
Okay.
The
This is the
frame
first
doesn't
I
talk
heard
to
of that,
us,
so that's
you know.
interesting.
So all that cyclone fencing is direct leaching of zinc into Puget Sound. So you take the zincs off your roof, you take the zinc out of your cyclone fencing, and you sweep your streets, and you've eliminated the majority of municipal toxins.
All right.
So they just became a contributor.
Okay, thank you for
And
that.
I have had one resident that's mad that they didn't put up an 8-foot fence, but I think our deer are too lazy to jump over it. But, yeah, so those are the things I had. That's just, you know, aware that it's going to be a disruption for us. No way to get around it. And if I was riding Amtrak, I would like to have ridden along the water. I think that's a prettier view than I-5. Just me, you know.
You just need to go north of Seattle.
Yeah, and Mike, you talked about the schedule changing. We've used Amtrak quite a bit going out to Montana and stuff. It's not a scheduled change of minutes, it's a scheduled change of days. I mean, look at all the landslides that have occurred on train. I know part of this is to eliminate some of that issue, but you go north and it really, they're always getting creamed. So that whole thing could stop for days at a time, and so who knows. But council, any more questions or comments? Ladies, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the testing and information, and anything you can provide us would be greatly appreciated. All right, next item on the agenda is the Center Drive Median Project Update. And it looks like we have Mr. McCreary as our presenter.
Mayor Courts, members of the council, good evening. We wanted to provide a quick update on the Center Drive revitalization project. There's a couple of reasons for that, which I'll enumerate. If you remember, you allocated $10,000 of city funds from 2017's budget for the execution of this project. So we felt it was good stewardship. We needed to report back to you to show you how those funds would be allocated. Secondly, the last time I briefed this council, we talked about phasing of the operation. Some of you raised some concerns about that, so we're going to discuss that this evening. Additionally, after the last briefing, I was approached by several of you as well with concerns about the pallet that we were using, potential future maintenance requirements. So I want to make sure that I'm able to assuage all of those concerns this evening prior to execution. At the completion of this brief, what I'm seeking is approval so that we may go ahead and begin executing this project as planned. Sorry. Okay. When we first started this project, we had phased it. The first phase was going to be areas 1 and 2, and 14 and 15, which are the two planting strips at either end of the city on Center Drive, 14 and 15 at DuPont Road, and 1 and 2 at the exit 118 off of I-5. After the meeting, I was approached about the fact that perhaps we should take a look at addressing the areas that are currently barren with dead trees in it, to take care of those first. But additionally, as we took a look and went in to inspect these areas, we realized that there's a lot of preparation work that's going to need to be done before we can even think about replanting. Area 2, for instance, which is the one where the main center portion of Center Drive right in downtown, there's possibility of reutilizing some of the trees because some of them are still healthy. The ground cover is still good. Plus, additionally, we need to take a look at traffic crossings because we're noticing that there are trails going through them, people using them illegally. Additionally, we'll have to take a look at the irrigation system there. Going into Area 1, what we noticed was this may be a total destruction, but there may be some salvageable plants in there. Right now, what it's got is Quanton cherries and various summer blooming and winter blooming heather. These are very old plants. They're very, very thick. They're in various states of health. Myself and Mike Farley walked through it. There is garbage in there. There are old tree stumps. I swear if we dig deep enough, we may actually find Jimmy Hoffa. Lots of work that needs to be done in this area, so we're going to take a much closer look at that and make sure we come up with a better plan. Next slide. So the original schedule was phase 1 was going to be areas 1 and 2 and areas 14 and 15. Phase 2 was to have been the 2 areas outside of Edmonds Village, areas 11 and 12. And then with gradual phasing for 3 and 4, as we had time to take a look at the budget permitted. What we're requesting is that we change the schedule. We will now go ahead and turn phase 1 into areas 11 and 12, which is the areas that skirt Edmond Village, and 14 and 15, which is part of the original phase 1. We'll continue on, turn phase 2 into areas 1 and 2, which are the main areas downtown, which I just addressed. Phases 3 and phase 4 remain the same. The plan for areas 11 and 12, which are the 2 areas by Edmonds Village, originally we discussed using a native scheme, using native plantings. This is what we've come up with. The palette that we will use is going to be mountain ash, our famous Douglas firs, Shumard oak, serviceberry, Paul Scarlet hawthorn, which is the pink flowering variety, and then various low-growing native shrubs and ground covers to accommodate the bottom. The actual palette that we will use, take a closer look. Most of these are natives. We're very familiar with the Douglas fir, of course. The mountain ash, serviceberry, and hawthorn are fruit-bearing trees, but they're not very vigorous. The berries hold on for a long time, so they will not create additional litter. And the fruit is also edible. The birds tend to eat the berries as a survival mechanism in February, March timeframe. meaning that you've got 20 or 12 months of interest off of this planting. The Shumard oak, we wanted to use there's only one oak tree that is actually native to this area, and that's the Corpus garryana, the Gary oaks. They're slow growing and hard to find actually for commercial plantings. So we chose a nice variety that will be much more upright and less, with a less invasive root stock. The underpinning, the understory plants, snowberry, Catani aster, wintergreen, Oregon grape, all natives, and we will throw in some mixed azaleas just for color in the spring. For area 14 and 15, which are the areas immediately abutting Stillicum Road up to International Drive, we're going for a simple planting of crimson maple, some more of the Paul scarlet hawthorn, and the same palette of underplantings that we were looking at for areas 11 and 12. Area 15, which is the area that immediately abuts with DuPont Stillicum Road. Right now, all is there is the old Quandong, 10% smarter than the Quandong cherry trees here, which are old and diseased. If you notice, if you drive past those, they're actually getting hit by trucks. So those are the wrong tree in the wrong place. Upon further inspection and Councilman Holder's advice last time, we took a look at those. They are diseased. They're all going to need to be removed in 2 to 3 years anyway, so we might as well just go ahead and knock that out now. The Japanese lilacs, which you see in this planting, are currently there. These are trees that were left over from the original Palisades project. Each of these trees is valued at about $200 a piece. They've already gotten firmly rooted. They're in a good spot. We can reincorporate them into the planting so it's less disruptive. We didn't want to move them because we probably would have killed them. So the crimson sunset maples, which you see here, these are currently in the neighborhood in the nursery. So we'll incorporate those because they're larger, and then we'll use the funds to replenish the stock for the street trees during this project. This is the palette of trees for those 2 areas. Only primary difference is those crimson sunset maples, which are a dark leaf variety, but they're also very upright. We will trim them as they continue to grow to a 14-foot branch level so that they're not interfering with trucks. Low litter, and again, the same variety of plants that you've seen for the other area. The budget, you gave us $10,000 for trees for this phase of the project, for phase 1 and half of phase 2. We're looking at a total of $3,928. These will be coming from the same vendor that provided the trees last year for the neighborhood. Your concern, ma'am, was that they were large enough. Each of these trees should be anywhere from 8 to 10 feet tall, if not larger, depending upon the variety. This is a really good budget. These are all, we're going to be doing this bare rooted, which will save us 50% of the cost of going with back and bald. For the time of the year that we're doing it is perfect for bare root planting, and these are all new varieties. For the understory, we're looking at, again, native varieties. We found a vendor here in Washington State. Very reasonable, and they do deliver. Total understory total is about $3,285, giving us for plantings alone about $7,113. So roughly leaving us $2,800 for overages, for adjustments, but also to continue with the plantings for areas 1 and 2 later on in the fall. That money can also be used to address the, also applied towards the reconfiguration of the sprinkler heads. One thing we did not include into the budget was the removal of the trees that are there now. Mr. Lim has already addressed that through other means. Dusty, do you want to speak on that?
Looking to exercise another vendor to see if they're capable of removing trees. The biggest thing is kind of setting up a traffic control plan so they can get access. So sometime probably in, I want to say January, February timeframe, you probably notice a correction, February timeframe, already in January. You probably already noticed some of the trees that Mr. Korea had identified as has some like orange or pink ribbon on them. Those are the ones we identified. That way it's easy for us to figure out which ones are for removal from there. So we'll be exercising a vendor that I want to test out.
Okay. The schedule for this for the new phase 1, just to see how we're going to execute this year. Once the trees are removed, which is going to take place during the February-March timeframe, we will arrange for delivery of the trees from J.R. Schmidt's down in Oregon. We're going to look for some volunteer support for this. I've already approached the Lions Club, and also, of course, we've got the leadership class out of the Pioneer, which supported us last time, which will potentially help as well. This should be a good 1 to 2 weekend project. Once the trees are done, then we will continue on with the understory. And once the understory is completed, then we will look at the reconfiguration of the sprinkler system there. So that we'll be careful, of course, when planting these trees not to dig into the current infrastructure. But once the trees are planted and we've at least got the holes dug, then we'll be able to adjust the sprinkler heads accordingly. June to July, we're going to take a look at site prep for areas 1 and 2, and we'll continue on with the plantings for those in the fall. So that was brief and to the point, subject to your questions from reports.
Okay, Councilmember Helder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Kyle. Looking at this, we budgeted $10,000 for the project, and currently the expenditure is going to be $7,100. Did that change at all as a result of this update, or is that still the same?
That's essentially the same.
Okay.
We actually, I think it's gone down by $600.
It's gone down since this. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Councilmember Coffey.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
For considering and fine tuning your project. So all of the, I guess, do I call it undercover, the smaller?
The understory plantings.
Are those going to be drop resistant plants?
Yes. All of them, especially the Mahonia, is very drought resistant. You've seen a lot of these plantings already in DuPont. The Catani aster, if you're familiar with the plantings out in front of the strip mall by Starbucks, that low shrub with the red berries on it, that's that one. Everything else, there of course will be some irrigation there, but everything else was chosen for its drought tolerance. That's the whole reason that we're doing this in the first place.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And I really do hope that you can save those cherry trees down by exit 19.
We're going to try. Mike and I went through and inspected every single tree. And there are the ones in area 2, there are trees that are still very viable. And so we're going to actually, that's what's prompted the entire redesign. The ones in area 1, there are about 4 that are potentially still salvageable, but all of them are being hit by a blight and they've been attacked by woodpeckers. So you'll see this spring as they start blooming, there's a lot of dead wood that's got to be removed. We're really concerned about the ones that are planted in the narrower portions of the strip. Some of those in the middle will probably be salvageable. But again, if it's the cherry, and I do know that it's because we're working right now with the historic village for a plan to replace the cherry trees that are along Barksdale. We do understand, and there's some sensitivity to the cherry trees in DuPont. So that's something else that we are considering. I'm working with the vendor right now to see if there are some varieties that could be incorporated that are much more suitable for urban plantings. There are some that are much more upright. Because of the climate here, cherry trees generally actually do not do well. They're not very disease tolerant, but there are some varieties that do very well. So we're looking at those, and I was planning on presenting that to the council later this year as one of the options.
Thank you.
Okay, council, I see no more comments. If there is no objection, you already approved the funding for this project, and I think the questions that you had have been answered by that. So if there is no objection, I don't see the need to move this into new business and do it. I think we just, give me a nod that you're okay to let them proceed as scheduled. Pretty good? Okay. Kyle, great presentation. I am just tickled by the work that the tree board does. Your group is one of the most professional and thorough groups that supports the city, and boy, I keep going back. You guys have been doing this 20 years ago. We would be not spending $2.5 million to fix other problems, but
I'm the forest company of DuPont, just there at the right place at the right time.
yeah, no, I think this is great, and we have a beautiful city, but it's going to be made more so and more sustainable. I really am excited about that, and I'm excited over the life of the project how Center Drive will. It's always been a beautiful part of the city, but I think it's going to really just pop. And appreciate all the work your group has done. Please extend our thanks to them, and we're excited to see it move forward.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the first opportunity for public comments. Feel free to come up, make comments on anything on or off the agenda. Limit your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name and address.
Ray Carr, 1852 Johnson Avenue, DuPont. Just a quickie, on the trains, you said it was 14 trains. Does that mean 14 trains coming back, leaving 28?
No, my understanding is it's a total of 14 total crossings.
So 7 trains?
7 each way or some combination.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that, thank you.
You're gonna resend us, Gus, you still got his information on those cool plants, the ground cover stuff?
I remember receiving the, what do you call it, it's a little more, turf that's more, what do you call it? Tolerant.
Because there's a specific turf they have for dog park areas, off-leash areas that maybe.
I was gonna test out in one of our park locations. I haven't figured out where exactly, but I was gonna test out a spot.
Yeah, I can contact the people in Portland and get all the details.
Okay,
Yeah,
just send it to Gus, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
David Bunker, 2702 MacArthur Street. Agenda item 7C, approving the 2017 Firefighters Collective Bargaining Agreement. Page 72 of the council packet, Article 26, Station and Shift Officers, Section 1, the first sentence. Every effort shall be made for each shift to have at least 3 firefighter personnel who are members of the local bargaining unit. This statement must be removed. The last sentence, reserves and volunteers shall not count towards the 3-person minimum. This statement should be removed. Page 77, Article 38, promotionals. Section item B, qualifications, requirements as determined by the employer with input of the union. With input of the union, this statement must be removed. For years, the citizens of DuPont have asked past and present mayor, city council, and city staff to put volunteers and reserve firefighter EMTs on the fire engine and staff and ambulance. Every month for the past decade, the fire department has put out their fire report showing 60 to 75% calls of medical. It is not a shortage of volunteers or reserve firefighters that takes the DuPont Fire Department out of service. Graham currently has 5 stations. 1 is all volunteer. Pierce County Fire District 13 is staffed 24/7 by 40 volunteers and 2 paid. Citygate did a study, said there is no shortage of volunteers in the area. However, due to the city's geographic location, in the county's population centers, the city of DuPont should pay above the market rate. The only reason the fire department of DuPont is out of service is because of the past and tonight's passing of collective bargaining. Moving forward, every time that the city of DuPont Fire Department is out of service, it is because you approved this collective bargaining agreement as it is written. Agenda 14B, moving forward on the process to buy a new medic unit when the city council will not staff the fire engine is insanity. Also, the ladder truck is the oldest apparatus in the fire department. The city of DuPont has gone vertical. We have apartments and hotels. How is an unstaffed new medical unit going to rescue someone on the 3rd story of an apartment, Patriots Landing, or a hotel? How is an unstaffed medic unit going to assist in technical rescues? How is an unstaffed medic unit going to protect multiple building structural fires? The definition of insanity is making the same mistakes over and over and expecting a different result. The old newspaper.
Thank you, Mr. Bunker.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more public comments, high school students, remember, at least once, when you gotta get up and make comment. Next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion? We have a motion from Councilmember Helder. We have a second from Councilmember Gassick. Is there any discussion? Okay. Does that mean everybody wants to speak, or? No. Okay. Councilmember Gorski wanted to speak.
Yes, I would like somebody to address Mr. Bunker's concern on the verbiage that he pointed out. And just to clarify whether or not it's new language, existing language that is going forward.
It's existing language, and in our negotiations, the issue of whether you're a professional firefighter or volunteer deals mostly with qualifications. Finding volunteers that are highly trained as a professional firefighter is hard to do. I can have the chief address that further, but that's the main driving point, and it's been there, at least from the last contract, right, chief?
Yeah, I believe you're correct on that. We do have reserves and they go through the same training, but there's a level of proficiency that comes with being exposed to it as your career versus something you do for volunteer. And I can speak to that from experience. I had volunteered with another agency for over 30 years. And the only way you get proficient in that capacity is being there all the time as a volunteer, which is practical when you have a career and family.
And I would also add in a general sense that it goes to the labor issue of working conditions. That's a right in this state for workers to bargain when they're represented by a union.
Councilmember Easton.
So I understand about the reserves. Isn't that Mr. Bunker's point in the, if volunteers are given an opportunity to work, they're willing to work. I mean, the Army does it, and so do other armed forces. We realize that there is less proficiency there, but I think that's what he's getting to in that when the engine is down, that's when the reservists can be best put into action.
Yeah, point taken. However, there is a reliability issue. You would expect someone to drop what they're doing with their job, their career, especially daytime hours. All over the country, you can't do that. There's a decrease in volunteers nationwide, although there are a lot of volunteers nationwide. The practicality of having reliable, dependable coverage is not there when you're responding from home or coming to the station for a standby. You don't have the reliability of coverage. There's a gap in that coverage. And we want to reduce that gap as minimal as possible to provide the service to the community.
Okay, if there are no more comments or questions, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving? Councilmember Coffey, did you have something else? Okay, all in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved. Thank you, Council. Next on the agenda is discussion items. We have none. Next is my report, just a couple items. Just to update the council that our effort with the presentations throughout the city for the ALS package continues. Tomorrow, Chief Creekmore and firefighter, is John joining us? Firefighter Roberts? Okay. We're going to be presenting to the Moms Club first thing in the morning. And then tomorrow night, we'll be presenting to the school board. And we continue just to get out and try to educate people as much as possible. And for members of the public that will not have the opportunity for whatever reason to see one of these, there is a videotape of the presentation on our city website, and copies of the detailed report as well as the presentation itself are available online. We're providing all of those. And just for council knowledge, it is my intent to bring the results of those presentations and the recommendation to you in April. And we've already scheduled it on the agenda. We've scheduled a workshop. We've scheduled a public hearing. So we're trying to build a schedule to give you the most opportunity to explore that. And, you know, my target date, if the decision is to move forward, is that we could have a ballot measure by 1 August, if that's the direction that the council would choose to go in. And I think it's important to also note that ancillary to this, or something that we need to be aware of, is that the private contract ALS providers that we deal with are becoming less and less available. And I think Chief Creekmore, you have some recent data over the last several days.
Yeah, as of January, yesterday, they have only been available 18.75% of the time. It's a pretty dramatic increase, and I can't find out why. I've talked to other agencies and asked what's going on. And I think there's just a huge demand for that service, not just from 911 calls, but from the jobs that they do, from transporting patients from one location to another. They call those inter-facility transports, where they might need a technical person that can monitor a patient en route from one facility to another that might have an IV. So they're extremely busy. They're swamped as well.
And again, that's a for-profit operation that provides a great service when they're available. They're just, the demand exceeds their availability. That's all I have this evening. City Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just run down a quick future agenda. On the 14th at 6 p.m. will be the first TBD meeting. There's some administrative items that we need to go through, MOUs and such, to make sure our insurance stays covered, and there's a couple of other items, selecting a president and vice and those things. At the meeting that night on the 14th, we have a number of presentations and a swearing in. Highlights include Silicon Historical Education Foundation giving us an update. State Farm will be here presenting their child ID grant that they gave us, and also will be closing out the 2015 testing report and that with our 2016 water quality report. And the other issue that night will be, we'll present a more detailed analysis after our discussion with the funding of street trees and sidewalks, answering some of your questions about the nexus and also some of the reliability questions. So we've got a more detailed analysis. We'll go through that first, answer your questions from the workshop, and then we'll talk about the resolution approving us to go forward on the first phase. The 21st workshop, we're going to be talking about school impact fees. That is a way to mitigate the impact of residential construction on a school district. And then we're going to talk about the community garden. 28th meeting, we have some unfinished business that will start tonight on the parking and other things. 28's kind of there right now. And that's probably as far as we need to go. Questions on that? Thanks.
Thank you. Council reports. Councilmember Court.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 19th of January last week, I attended the Pierce County Regional Council meeting. It was actually quite busy, longer than normal. They had a public hearing reference some Pierce County Comprehensive Plan amendments. Sumner School District in the city of Gig Harbor had some amendments for their urban growth area to expand a little bit. The city of Lonnie Lake had 2 amendments for potential annexation areas that they're looking at. But the intriguing one was the potential incorporation area of Tehela, which is south of Bonnie Lake and north of Oregon, where they have an employment-based planned community by Newland Communities. So Newland Communities asked, they kind of created, I shouldn't say Newland Communities created this, but they asked for a new term, really, this potential incorporation area. And they wanted to designate that area as an area that potentially could be a new city. It could, in the future, also be a potential annexation area to either Oregon or Bonnie Lake, but it appears that the residents of this area don't want to necessarily do that. So if they were going to annex, they actually have to have a designation of potential annexation area. But to incorporate, we do not need that moniker of potential incorporation area, even though the recommendation of the PCRC last Thursday was only like 14 to 9 in favor, which all the other ones were 100% approval of. And then the city council is the ones that actually make that determination. They had the election of officers, the chair and vice chair of the same, Joe Lonergan and Bill Trimbley. And then the committees, they had their appointments for those 2. So the economic development is Guernsey and Wayland. Operations, they just swapped between Mayor Lucas and Mayor Petzinger. So now it's Petzinger Lucas. The transportation is now Lucas Petzinger instead of the other way around. And the growth management is Evan Guernsey. They also mentioned, and I that email that was sent out to you guys reference the General Assembly that's going to be on February 16th, 6 p.m. Base Technical College, the Central Moeller campus on South 19th Street. Everybody's invited to that. That's also the second day of the city action days that evening. So, like I said, everybody's invited. That's what the PCRC was all about.
Thank you. Councilmember Gorski.
Thank you. Last week met with the mayor. Thank you for your time. In lieu of not having a retreat, we did discuss some city issues that are concerns. So my focus primarily on our business community, especially along the Wilmington corridor. And one point I'm hearing sometimes when I go to businesses feedback, and I want to offer this one to the fire chief of Creekmore, that one business had an inspection, a fire inspection. They were a little bit dismayed that they have businesses elsewhere that DuPont charges a fee for that. If you could provide information on other communities nearby that might also offer a fee, just so I understand, some do, some don't, where we stand in that mix, that would be helpful for me personally. So I'm just seeking that information. I'll give you some feedback on what they were saying as well. But what we really want to do is look at the businesses on Wilmington, and it's important to delineate between business owners and property owners because they're not one and the same, and what we can do and what we can't do, and so that when we look at our business community, we can make it as healthy and vibrant as possible from a city perspective on what we can do to promote business, but also what we do to service the businesses as far as fire inspections and other things that we do have to offer. So just want other council members to think about that and look at that and potentially future agenda items that we incorporate to workshops. So just be focused that we have a business community here. It's important that we recognize them good and lean times. So let's just keep that focus throughout 2017. I'm not going to be available in February 14th meeting. I'm going to be in China teaching a class. So I'm not going to remote in. So
I'll get with you, I'll find, we'll reschedule that.
yeah, so if we could, I'd appreciate that. And that's my point on that. And just as I mentioned to the public and council, I will not be here on the 14th because I'll be abroad. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Easton.
Last week, the tree board met. You were already briefed on one of the items of their discussion. I also asked that they would participate in the Cincinnati Bay Area ordinance update. Clearly, they have an understanding of the trees in the urban landscape, but I think it's just as important that they provide their expertise in the open spaces and all of that. So we'll continue to rely on their expertise for that as we go through that process. I also asked them when they're done with this project if they might consider looking at developing some sort of executive summary for us to develop some sort of management aspect for the sensitive areas, for the open spaces, for all of the trees that we have around town, particularly as it relates to fire barriers, that's wildland fire barriers, defensible spaces, and also non-native species intrusions into those open spaces. So perhaps that will get some focus from them once this project is done. I also took some time last week to attend a 2-day training on habitat and site restoration. It was put on by the Northwest Environmental Training Center. It was a very in-depth opportunity to understand restoration practices. I thought it would be valuable as we're going through the Cincinnati area ordinance update to get a little bit up to speed on that, and also with our plans for restoration scholarship. I think it was valuable. So I hope to put a lot of what I learned into practice both during that process and
And otherwise, there's a lot of dedication.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no other reports, it's time for department reports. Council, you have copies of the department reports in your package. If you want to ask any specific questions to the staff, they're prepared. Councilmember Westman?
Yes, directed to the community development report. Item down towards the bottom where it says processing several new pre-app meetings. And there's a proposed meeting evidently on a proposal on vacant lot adjacent to the Creekside Apartments. What lot is that? Is that the one referred to as lot Y?
Yes, hear me now? Okay. Yes, I think Councilman Westman, it is what I guess is commonly referred to as Lot Y.
All right, and about when would that meeting be held and is it open to the public? The reason I'm concerned about that is that is the site for the Methodist Mission original site going back into our history. And secondly, it is also as the site for the Buffalo Soldiers Bivouac area, again, going back into our history. So I'm concerned about what the applicant is suggesting here in that pre-app meeting and when it is going to be available and is it going to be open to the public. So those who are concerned about the preservation and restoration of our historical sites will have an opportunity to hear what the applicant has to say and be able to later on be to the point of making appropriate comments if it was going to be brought forward for consideration.
Deputy Mayor, I'll start in a general sense and let Mr. Wilson finish specifically. The application, the permit meetings, those are not open to the public. When we get into an area that you wish to bring forward to the public, we can do that via workshop, via meeting, via different means and vehicle. Those are heavy technical work sessions that have proprietary information by applicants that we're not allowed to share. So in this area, if you wish us to prepare a special briefing and presentation where we can discuss and share what we're allowed to by law, we'd be happy to do that. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Danek. And reiterate what I was going to say, state what I was going to say is that they're technical working meetings. And it's basically a question and answer period between us and technical staff of the city and an applicant to find out what's the process, what do they need to go through. We're well aware of those particular historical features on those particular properties, and those are definitely concerns and issues that we're going to be raising through that process to the applicant. They have a responsibility to address those things in a way that meets all city codes and requirements, as well as, we'll have the environmental review process right now that will come through, that we'll be able to utilize those things when we actually have a formal permit application now. This is generally a conceptual design phase on the part of an applicant, where they're coming in with a concept and they want to get some feedback as to what they need to do to put together a full-fledged proposal we'll consider. There are future processes. We have a site design review process in the city that includes and incorporates opportunities for public participation and comment, depending on the level of the type of site plan review. So there will be ample opportunities in the future when there's a specific proposal, but this is more of a question and answer session. Them and their design team to ask us questions so we can give them guidance on what they need to do to put together an application that meets our requirements and meets the city's interests.
Well, I want to thank you for putting that in the report and allowing us to be aware that there is this particular desire for this pre-app meeting. And I'm sure that others within the community are concerned, and we will look forward to how it proceeds through the application process.
Thank you very much for your comments, sir.
Councilmember Coffey.
Yes. To follow up on that, Jeff, that's the piece of property that's in the MRO, right?
Yes, it is.
And so that basically has to be gotten rid of or whatever before the property can be developed?
There's some work that we've done in the past, and I've worked with our city attorney on issues related to the MRO as it applies to that particular piece of property, and it doesn't necessarily, in reviewing the language of the MRO, reviewing the status of that particular property, doesn't necessarily preclude them from proceeding at this point in time, but in terms of the question you asked and why we're doing the comp plan amendment to correct that, we want to remove all ambiguity by making some very clear changes. It doesn't necessarily preclude someone at this point on that particular piece of property to be able to move forward or at least initiate a permitting process.
Okay, thank you. But I do have another question for you. On the next page of the current plan review and/or inspection, I'm curious, what is the forward operating base brew rate?
It is a microbrew.
And where is that?
It's at the, I want to remember the name of the project, but I can never remember the name of that particular, it's the Williamson Place subdivision, the industrial buildings at the corner of, kind of the southwest corner of DuPont, Stillicum, and Center.
Oh, right by Anything.
Yeah, if you know, Robin Gymnastics went in and the fitness center.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. No, I was just curious. I'm not really into that kind of stuff, personally. It's not televised, but whatever. Really, I'd like to move on to the Parks and Rec and the tourism. And I noticed that you went to a meeting with the Pierce County and the Economic Development Department that oversees the LTAC. And one of the negatives that came up was the traffic congestion by DuPont. I was really surprised that that would come out in an LTAC meeting or something. Do you know the context of that?
I do. Those stats were based off Twitter feeds that they were tracking, that Pierce County Tourism was tracking. It's all based off Twitter.
That's amazing. I like the report, and I told for the 2016 of your visitors to the museum. How do these compare to last year's figures? I can't remember. We're up considerably, aren't we?
That's correct. I believe it's 120% increase in visitorship for 2016. And I actually have staff member Rice working on a more comprehensive report for your February report that will give you the exact numbers per month.
Great. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to the fire department.
Okay.
131 of our packet, and 133. And this goes back, the monthly question I asked, about the ALS ambulances were not available. 59.19% of calls, 15 transports, 76 of these were ALS. That's kind of setting the, but then back on page 131, your total EMS calls for the month were 66, is that correct?
That, December?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So then, down below, where you say priority type, priority 1, ALS, BLS, routine. So if I were to use your percentages that you have there, against that 66 calls, I should come up with the number of calls that were like priority 1 and whatever. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yeah. Yes.
Okay, well, I couldn't quite get it to work out, but I came up with more calls by those percentages, so And then how does that apply to the calls that no ALS ambulance was available? How many, so what do you base the 59.09% ALS ambulance was not available?
That's all calls.
All calls.
One is dispatch on all medical calls. It gives the transport unit so we can stay within the city. But when you carve out just the priority one transports that met ALS criteria, 76% of those were ALS patients. So there's a higher percentage of patients that we're transporting that are priority one calls versus our overall calls, which is more of an alarming number because we're finding they're less available
that you're
advanced life support calls because they're busy, they're tied up on other instances.
Right. So that means that our fire department with EMT basics are transporting ALS calls.
That'd be correct.
Okay. Thank you. And by the way, all of you, all the departments, great reports. Once again, there's a fabulous amount of information in your reports. I really enjoy reading them. Thanks.
Councilmember Helder. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along similar lines, Chief Creekmore, reading in November, there's a bullet point here that says ALS for the month activity report. ALS was not available for 55% of our ALS calls. I go to December, and I don't see that same bullet point. Would you happen to know that number? I see that the ambulance wasn't available for 59.09% of all calls, but not how many ALS calls there were.
No, I can look at that, but when I got the reports put together, our transport medical reports already submitted for billing, so I would have to go back and look at each one of the medical reports and read the narrative and find out what category of patient.
Okay, that'd be great. And then the average response time in November, or excuse me, December was 283 seconds or 4 minutes and 43 seconds. And then for the ALS, average arrival time was 1806. And then I look down here at the bottom of this chart, priority one medical, for our fire department arrived on scene within standard 92.3% of the time. Is that what I'm reading correctly?
Correct.
Okay. Could we get a breakdown of when there's a priority one call, how often we're meeting, how that standard, or I should say what the time hack is for those particular calls?
Make sure I'm understanding what you're asking.
Can we get the average, I'll reword that, can we get the average time that it takes for our fire department to arrive from dispatch to on scene for a priority one medical call?
Yeah,
I can break that down.
And I did break that down at the bottom that we're meeting the time standard on priority one medical calls, city standard.
Right.
92.9% of the time, 80% of the time, so you know that I can get that number even, but I imagine it's probably around the same.
I'd just like to compare apples to apples and for ALS calls, priority one ALS calls, what's our average versus the average of in the private to arrive, which is 1806 in December. And as we have kind of this broader discussion in the community with ALS, if we could have chart some kind of graph that we could look at historical data and say in November ALS was not available 60% of the time. In December it wasn't available 55%. We can go back a year maybe. It could just be a simple graph month to month. How often was this not available? I think that would be good data for us to have that's going to drive decisions that we're going to make soon. Thanks.
Councilmember Easton.
Jeff, in your report, you mentioned one of the working items is the sensitive area ordinance update. Could you tell us when the next opportunity for public to attend and provide input to that would be?
Well, the next opportunity would be the first meeting in February of the Planning Commission. So I'm blank on the date at this point. I think it's February 13th, I believe, is our next Planning Commission meeting, and that's what we'll be having. Really starting to have an in-depth working session with them on specifics related to it. So that'll be the next. subsequent meetings will depend on a number of different things, whether or not we go to additional planning commission meetings on a monthly basis or not, but it will be hitting very hard beginning February 13th.
Great, thank you. Also, in addition to that, to follow up on Councilmember Westman's comments, currently as it stands, access to Puget Sound is, well, down through the Bluff Trail at the end of McNeil. The other access that most people use is across the property that is just right across the creek right here from us. So the lot that Councilmember Westman is talking about is critical that we maintain access to the top of Sepulchre Creek, because unless we go through the buffer, the current trail in its configuration passes through that property. So I'm sure that's going to be a topic of discussion for them.
There's many points of discussion that we're going to have, at least we're looking at the initial site plans of things that are important to the city that we need to make sure are taken into consideration when they do their site design.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Gorski.
Thank you. This is for Chief Sheehan. Going through the reports, I noticed that there are two motor vehicle theft reports for November with numerous prowls through November and December. I just was wondering if you can give us an update. Were they taken from residences or businesses, and any other information that we might have to concern ourselves with?
Councilman Zagorski, I will have to get back to you on that. I don't have an answer tonight.
Councilmember Westman.
In response to Councilmember Coffey's comments having to do with the data on page 101 put out by the Pierce County Economic Development Department having to do with the congestion on I-5, they entered into an agreement with the Economic Development Department of WSU located in Vancouver in order to analyze the different postings on Twitter and Instagram having to do with tourism in and around JBLM and Pierce County, as well as here in DuPont. And so this was a conclusion coming out of that, and that the congestion on I-5 in that corridor contributed to a lot of negative comments about DuPont, about South Sound region because of all that congestion. So it's a valid position to take, and Diane Rice attended that briefing, and together with Amy have given us this report here. It's something that we should be very much aware that tourism and visitors coming to DuPont, they are influenced by the congestion on the traffic on I-5.
Councilmember Court.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One quick question, Mr. Wilson. Is that local planning course that you have talking about next month or March, is that coming along? Is that going to happen?
Yes, we're just arriving at confirming the date with it, that we will be hosting, and we're working on putting together the agenda now. We're working with Department of Commerce staff, and so as soon as we finalize that, we'll get that information out right away. And it's not only going to be open to planning commissioners and elected officials here, citizens here, but also other communities. So expected to be well attended. I think there are a number of jurisdictions in the immediate area that want to participate and attend that meeting as well.
All right, thank you.
Okay, seeing no more comments or questions, moving to unfinished business. There is no unfinished business, so we'll move to new business. We have two items of new business tonight. The ordinance regarding parking control signs, your first reading, and then the approving an agreement with Bainbridge Island Fire Department for the purchase of a medic unit. City Attorney Gordon Kark has the parking control sign ordinance.
Good evening, council members. The legislation proposed tonight under its first reading is an amendment to D&C Chapter 1603. Staff was responding to and some thinking about some issues regarding business parking in some of our retail areas and some time-based restrictions on when you could or cannot park. And we realized in going through this process that we actually had no general provision within our parking restriction of the code to actually have signage that would have a time-based or vehicle-based or the kind of parking restriction you see in any city, like, loading, unloading, commercial vehicles only, that kind of thing. So what we're proposing is simply an amendment that would allow for that type of restriction or cities or signs or parking devices that would allow the city to control parking in a particular area at a time or vehicle type based analysis as opposed to completely prohibited parking, which we have right now the ability to do either through curb painting or signage or going street by street and creating individual restrictions on certain areas of street like we have already with both where they have listed here, both Montgomery Street and Palisade Boulevard, where we have some highly specific restrictions on parking on those streets. But this amendment would simply give the city the authority to put up a sign that said no parking from this time to this time on these dates, something as simple as that, which we really don't have the authority to do so right now. And it's pretty straightforward. You'll notice also that in 1603-020A, we also are proposing a slight change to that language that would be in conformity with the new section as well. And that's just a little bit of house cleaning. Nothing will really change in that section and our ability to prohibit parking permanently from certain locations. That's all I have. Unless you have any questions.
Council, any questions or comments? Councilmember Coffey.
Yes, I like this idea, and I hope, that it could benefit our business area. But there's one other question that I have. In driving around town, when the Public Works Department is trying to do their street sweeping, is there any way that we could also, include somehow that we could put out temporary no parking signs so that the street sweeping can be successful? There's, overall, it seems like it gets done. It's successful, but there's almost like 3 streets that are bad actors when it comes to the Public Works being able to be successful in getting their streets swept. Sure. So that's one thing that I would like to see. I don't know how you would do that, but we put up temporary signs no parking for the 4th of July, all around Clock Tower. So, I would hope that we can do something, just so that there's a temporary no parking sign available for the city to use for specific reasons.
Because of our copy, staff agrees with you, and in fact, we've worded this such that if you'll notice, when you talk about other traffic control device, that would, within it, subsume a temporary sign.
Right.
And so that would be our hope here. However, if you'd like me to look at this language and we can make something more specific to temporary, I could take a look at that. But right now, our intent would be other traffic control device would in fact be a temporary sign, or don't park here, or only park from this time to this time. So, yes.
And I did highlight that and underline it in red. So, yes, but
that was our thoughts as well.
I didn't know if we had to be more specific.
No, we shouldn't have to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Corbin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Kirk. I, of course, have talked to businesses downtown, and I know that there are a few businesses that are looking forward to something like this, but I take it that we're going to, establish this. If we establish this, is there a process or is there a thought right now of once this is approved that we're going to take a look at how we're going to implement it? And, we're already looking at places that we want to possibly put up some. I know that there's a budgetary thing at that point, but or any of the places that we're going to put yellow curbing and so forth, or is this, or is that going to just be up to us at that point to start this discussion? Well, that's an excellent question, Councilmember Core. Actually, like any other ordinance, it's up to the staff to enforce and implement of our regulatory structure. Right now, the purpose would be for this particular authority would be handled through our Public Works Department, law enforcement, and of course, city administrator there to make determinations as to, and then pulling in whatever expertise we need to see, do we need a parking place twice a year, this or that, make sure it's in conformity with the, and of course, Public Works, make sure our signs are in conformity with the, federal and state sign codes, that kind of thing. But it would be left up to staff in the enforcement of this ordinance, just like any other ordinance. And I know that the city administrator didn't want to add to that, he just signaled me, yes, okay.
Yeah, it's not, just to clarify, it's not just staff. With our mayor and council form of government, it's the executive branch, so the mayor would be part of that. So you would enable the legislation, we would make reports back on very similar things, and so you would always have the authority, if you didn't like what the executive branch was doing, to change the ordinance or be as specific as you wanted. A really good example recently is the speed limit. It's exactly kind of the same concept of the state. So the legislature said, hey, here's some money, we want you to study and raise the speed limit out in the rural areas by 90 and 75. They did the study, the state, the executive branch, WASDOT got the study back, and they didn't implement the 75-mile-an-hour speed limit. Some members of the legislature aren't happy with that because they thought they meant to tell the agency to do this, but they don't have that power. So now they're working through the legislature, you saw this in the paper, a bill that would raise the speed limit, and then the executive branch would have to do it. So on a much smaller scale, it would be very similar. If you didn't like what the mayor and his staff were doing, then you would always have the ability to carve out and dictate what exactly you wanted.
And actually, Administrator Dan makes an excellent point, just for clarification in the future, whenever I say staff, I specifically mean the mayor's staff and the executive branch of the government. So thank you, that's a good clarification.
Councilmember Wesson.
Just in reference to Council Member Comfy's comment having to do with street cleaning and the no parking sign having to do with that, on Palisade there's many trees that are shedding a lot of leaves and all this. Many of the tenants in those residences are military, and they are away on TDY assignment, and they park their cars out in front of their homes in that parking area that no parking would be posted. So they're not there in order to remove their vehicles. So I don't know to what extent there would be enforcement of a no parking type situation under that consideration.
Well, I can't, that would fall outside the purview of this ordinance,
Right.
except how we would enforce it. My guess would be, what I would propose, that if we were going to put out temporary signs specifically like that, we would want to, give some previous notice to people who lived on those streets. If we got information back and we determined that someone was deployed and couldn't move their car, I suspect that we would not go ahead and enforce on that. But that's on a case-by-case basis, so yeah.
Okay, seeing no more questions, I'll move this at the next meeting to second reading.
Thank you so much. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Gordon. Next, just for council, I mean, it's, if the council wishes to move this to second reading, I have no objection to that. No? Okay, we'll just hold it to it next time. Okay, the next item of business is the agreement with Bainbridge Fire Department to purchase a 2016 medic unit, and Chief Creekmore is lead on that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. What you have before you tonight is it's a process that's utilized that the state and local agencies give us the ability to do, utilizing someone's already open request for proposal process. It saves us the time from going out and opening an RFP to purchase large-scale equipment. Last year's budget was approved at $214,249 for an ambulance. And you're probably wondering why Bainbridge Island, why not another agency? I looked at Pierce County 21, which is Graham. They have a Type 1, which is built on basically a pickup truck type chassis. That one's about $20,000 more than a Type 3. Type 3 is similar to what we have now. It's built on an E450 chassis. Type 2 ambulance would be one that's a van, would be impractical. So we looked at utilizing another agency's open bid process. This allows us to utilize the work that they've done and save us that time. And I do expect it to come far under what was budgeted based off feedback I've gotten from the manufacturer. And I'm just asking that we approve this.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the agreement? We have a motion from Councilman Westman. Is there a second? We have a second from Councilmember Guest. Discussion. Councilmember Hilder.
Just a quick question, Chief. So whatever Bainbridge Island is looking to procure, we would basically be following along in that procurement process?
Yeah, with some very minor changes. Ours would not be 2016, it would be 2017.
Okay.
They have some different seating arrangements that necessarily wouldn't work, so it's a very minor change. What you don't buy is their base unit.
And so you anticipate it coming under what we budgeted?
Correct.
Do you have a number?
Just off the top of my head, I know their base unit's like about 150, but when you make some minor changes, put some safety equipment, buy some additional equipment like a mobile data computer that you can utilize them around to hospitals, so we don't have to talk on the radio. Also some electronic patient care reporting tablets. Those are really insignificant dollar amounts when you compare it to you're buying a base unit at $150,000.
Councilmember Helder, too, if I could expound, the acquisition process is pretty complicated, and let me explain to council and everybody watching what exactly we're doing here and step by step. So this agreement with Bainbridge, this interlocal, allows us to use the provision in state law of using someone else's acquisition and open bidding process. So we're not buying an ambulance tonight. We are just simply doing the interlocal. Now he can go shopping using the same specs with minor changes that the other fire department used, and then you'll see the contract later.
So basically, it's the same RFP that they had outward following along that same.
Exactly. So one of the nice things the state did to streamline acquisition is they recognized that one community, city, county, whatever, did an RFP process in compliance with state law, and another community wanted the same product or service, they would be allowed to use that process and select that same provider services and goods.
So if they went and bought a Bentley ambulance, would we be kind of locked into that same track, or could we?
Right, yes, because we always have the choice to conduct our own RFP process. So it's typically not used to do model shopping, but you would say, like Chief said, we need a type 1 ambulance with the following specifications, you get the system. You see if another community has done an RFP process. We found Bainbridge selected an ambulance with similar type and requirements that we needed. So this is what allows us to go ahead and purchase that without an RFP process of our own.
Great, okay, thank you.
Councilmember Court.
So you were mentioning, Mr. Danik, that the contract was coming before us, but if we've already approved the budgeted amount, if the RFP process comes through and at that amount or less, wouldn't you just purchase it?
No, actually, and I appreciate the question. So the council allocates money into the budget. You have now set a boundary for us on the purchase of the ambulance coming out of the ER fund. But still under state law with the acquisition law, since it exceeds the 15,000, is that right? What's the mayor limit? So because it exceeds $30,000 in total value of the mayor's authority, then council still has to approve the contract. So anything big, you're going to see 2 or 3 times.
Councilmember Coffey.
Yes. Chief, could you, for the benefit of the audience, kind of refresh our memories as to why we are buying a new ambulance now?
Yeah, we evaluate the apparatus every year, and the current one is 16 years old. And at that age, the suspension starts getting a lot looser, and it's not practical back and rebuild that. We got to search for a lengthy period of time. That's really the main reason. Another reason is also this can be more usable. It was built using a BOS type, basic life support type specification. And even that is crowded for just basic life support care. You're going to bring another person with you to transport, so you have 2 people in the back. It's pretty tight. So the one we're looking at is going to have more compartment space. So it'll be a little taller, a little bit bigger. Everything will be a little bit bigger in the back, so there's more usability. It would have a lockable drug vault that has ability to be utilized in the future if we end up getting advanced life support. We'll have some added features like a refrigerator for medications that we know that that's going to be a future, that medications are going to be refrigerated. So we're really getting this built for the future. But it's needed now because of the replacement schedule.
There was you and I had a discussion about this, and the one thing that I took away from our discussion was the new, the bed, I'm not sure.
No, it's a gurney. Yeah, last month we got I had help with Sabrina from HR, and she put in for a $5,000 grant through our risk management group, and we were awarded that to buy what's called a power gurney. And the whole bottom section, instead of lifting it, raises with a battery-operated hydraulic system. The fact that that can reduce back injuries, the potential of it over the life of a gurney could potentially save $70,000 a year of direct back injury costs. We've been fortunate, but it's a good way to prevent that from happening. There's other things that are out there technology-wise that actually pull the gurney in. I can't remember what they call it, but it takes the gurney and pulls it in so no one is even touching that gurney. That unit itself is $28,000, and we're not looking at that because I think the power gurney itself is far better and really reduces back injuries, safer for the patient. So that's one of the things that we're going to add.
Councilmember Elder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was one addressing a comment that was made earlier in public comment, because it was a concern that I had as one of my very first council meetings last year about our ladder truck. I know it's aging, it's old, so is the ambulance. I just want to make sure in your mind, I know we're not purchasing an ambulance right now this second, but make sure in your mind that this is the priority for the fire department.
Yeah, I believe so. And there's also money set aside in the ARP fund to replace an engine that, from my last look, was pretty significant. So we can look at replacing the engine in the future with a more practical engine that gives us both pumping, firefighting capability and rescue capability with reach, which would be a good benefit. It's not as much as a 100-foot ladder truck that costs $1 million. We have that unit available to us through automatic aid as well as mutual aid from both Joint Base Lewis McChord. We have that unit available from West Pierce. So we have that larger unit available. When we look at replacing the fire engine, we look at something that's more practical. And I'll just talk because I've had this experience. In 1997, we won the Cone Village fire in Bremerton. 3 people lost their life. The first things that the fire department did on their arrival was using ground ladders, rescuing people off their balconies because fire was in their room. A ladder truck wouldn't have made much of a difference there because the speed to move a ladder truck takes a lot of time. What you need is short, quick reach to be very mobile to go in and put the fire out, take the risk away from the people, then get the people. Because the longer you take rescuing people without putting water on the fire is going to be bigger. So there's a balance between rescue and fighting fire that is very critical when you're put in that situation.
Yeah, and you're the professional on that topic, so I want to make sure I at least ask. Thanks.
Okay, I see no more discussion. We have a motion and a second on the floor for approving an agreement with Bainbridge Island Fire Department to purchase a 2016 medic unit. It's really a 2017 medic unit. All in favor of approving this agreement, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Council. And we're at our second and final opportunity for public comments. The rules remain the same. Give us your name and address. You may speak to any topic on or off the agenda. Limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Lee Chase, 309 Barksdale. Part of the reason I'm up here is so the group in the back decide whatever their plan is. But I do want to talk about tonight's presentation. I'm really sorry that Sound Transit and WashDOT left before even the first public comment, because maybe they'll get some information. But seeing they're not here, I'm going to ask if the city of DuPont would pass on my comments to them. I'm really concerned about exit 119 and the intersection between the bridge and Barksdale, DuPont Stillwell Road for a couple of reasons. One, presently right now, Cars are from the DuPont Silicon Road, parked in the middle of the intersection when the light is red. That's a safety issue. I don't care about cars hitting other people. I care about our public safety people coming into the village and not being able to come in because the cars are in the middle of the intersection. The second thing is, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I have a real concern about the light between the south of the railroad tracks, north of the bridge, when you're going southbound. Presently, between the tracks and the stop bar, you can put between 2 and 3 cars. That depends on how you stagger the cars. Right now, if you would go there and watch, the third car sticks its back end into the area there by the track. I don't know how wide an engine and the cars are either side of the track, but I know that the track is not the limit of the width of the engine. You're going to get an accident there. I would recommend, or I would at least ask a traffic engineer to look and see if that light should be on the north side of the track, not on the south side of the track. The other issue that's happening is there isn't 53 feet of space between the stop bar in question and the tracks. That means for every tractor trailer that comes, because we're using primarily 53-footers, that tractor trailer has to stop on the north side of the track. That light is operated, is a pressure sensor light. You have to be at the stop bar in order for the light to change colors. Put 2 trucks there, you don't have to worry about disturbing traffic because it'll never move if there's nobody coming northbound, because there's no sensor, no pressure. That's just my thing. I've only been using the light ever since it was installed, so I don't know how long it's been. I will finish up one other thing, Mr. Helder. Just to let you know, the issue of joining on others' RFPs for the fire department would be now coming full circle. One of the engines that we presently have, I believe, in the 1990s, was used by 11 other departments. We were the ones that put out the RFP. So it's kind of nice to see it full circle.
David Barnett, 2702. On the RFP, have any of you been to Bainbridge recently? It's all rural. They're buying a big ambulance because they have to get down steep roads, very narrow, to get to the residents that are on 5-acre lots. All the cities that are buying ambulances are buying the Ram, the Mercedes-Benz, or the Ford. They're narrower and taller. They have more cubic volume. He wants to buy a bigger ambulance. Here we go again. Same mistake, insanity. You had to go out and change the parking so the ambulance could get down McDonald Street. Please reevaluate that and buy something that will serve DuPont. Second, at a workshop during the budget, your city administrator on the fire department stated light duty, injuries, FMLA, military or maternity leave, military leave, gave you a whole list of why you have overtime. You had a chance to put volunteers on the firemen. You refused. Helder asked for historical data. Every one of you except for Helder and Corp voted for the existing language. You haven't changed. The experts that this city paid for said to have a combination fire department until the mining stops. Seriously, let's reevaluate. Going to the people for money right now, you just had Sound Transit 3. Guess what the school district's doing? We have an operations levy coming up. They're far more important than you. Okay? I'll see you tomorrow night.
Somebody lost the short straw there.
I'm Kayla DeFletch. I'm from Champion Street in Stillwater, Washington. And I really just had a comment on the ambulance in 2016, the Bainbridge and medical equipment. I really think I work as an intern in St. Clair ER, and I think I see all the time firefighters coming in with older ambulances and older gurneys, and I think it's really cool that you guys approved the new Type 1 ambulance, and they're able to get a power gurney, because a lot of times I see, a lot of patients complain a lot, but a lot of people complain about the old gurneys, how sometimes they have tears in them, sometimes they'll just put like an old sheet over it just to make it look new, and what cities really need is new equipment for medical care, and I think it really improves the city.
Thank you.
One more thing, I took the sheet. Next month,
You already left.
right, but okay,
I'm sorry, you already left.
But the code doesn't say you can't come up more time. David Bunger, 2702 MacArthur. Chief, your annual report's coming up?
You're
Could you put in
you are
water
not
fire department is out of
recognized.
service?
You are not recognized. Take your seat.
Update your code.
Any other comments? Okay, council comments. Councilmember Corr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to mention that my wife and I were honored to attend a dedication ceremony at the Rochester American Legion Post 49 this last weekend as they performed a Gold Star banner ceremony, and they subsequently rededicated the American Legion Rochester Post number 49 to Corporal Christopher Nelson, Post number 49. Corporal Nelson was a local Rochester resident who joined the Army and was killed in action 18 November 2007. And also the Gold Star banner ceremony was held for the widow and family members of Corporal Nelson. Post Commander Bob Clark, who has also helped us out here with the American Legion Riders for one of our events, did a fabulous job with the ceremony and was attended by hundreds of people, including family members, local citizens, JBLM soldiers, members of the American Legion Band, Patriot Guard Riders, representatives of the Gold Star Wives, and many others. So I just wanted to mention that was a very, very nice ceremony, and my wife and I were pleased we were invited and pleased we were able to go. I also wanted to mention that tomorrow at Patriots Landing, there's going to be a Bronze Star ceremony at noon that I will be attending. And also, I want to make sure that everybody understands that we have a planning commission vacancy, if not more possibly in the future. So for those of you residents that are interested in being part of the planning commission, please get with the city administrator and city clerk to get the proper paperwork in, because we're looking for volunteers.
Thank you. Councilmember Coffey.
Yes. The DuPont Lions Club is sponsoring a blanket and coat drive on February 4th down at Forza's, 10 to 2. There will be a drop box also at the fire department and I believe here at City Hall. So if you have gently used items that you would like to share for the homeless or needy families, it would be greatly appreciated. That's February 4th, 10 to 2 at Forza.
Thank you, Councilmember Weston.
Yes, like Councilmember Gorski, I too will be missing the February 14th meeting, as well as the subsequent work session. Not that I'm going to be in China on business. I'm going to be in Italy on personal family tourism business. And secondly, I too will be at the award assembly, I guess you might call it that, at Patriots Landing tomorrow, in order to honor an individual that's going to be receiving a very great national award.
And I would love to be there for that, but I'll be swearing in our newest officer, Wyatt Gustafson, at the police academy at the same time, so I get to go up with the police department and the city administrator and do that business tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. Okay, Okay, seeing no more council comments, the city council meeting for Tuesday, January 24th is adjourned at 9:01.
Hey, Ray, how come you get to go up